Good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to welcome you in this ENVIRONET-hosted seminar co-organized with the USAID and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. I'm Karim Ustadi, and I'm a co-chair. I serve as co-chair of the OECD DAC ENVIRONET network on environment and development cooperation. So that network is an important network under the Development Assistance Committee that works in support of the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, the Rio Conventions on climate change, biodiversity and desertification, for an impactful and meaningful development cooperation and support to developing countries. So really welcome to today's seminar. Which again is hosted by USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. So really thanks to both organizations for your engagement and your work across these fundamental topics to support developing countries through development cooperation, and really to support those in the climate change and clean air fields and topics. So thank you for all the participants to making the time, also from different time zones. So again, thank you for waking up early in the morning or staying up late in the night. Again, thank you for your effort. You will be well repaid, I'm sure about. So this event, of course, has been shared widely with the network, so the Development Assistance Committee and the ENVIRONET delegates, with different stakeholders throughout the development cooperation field and network. So we really hope that this seminar is useful for you and for all the experts, and can really give a reason and more ideas on and the occasion and the chance to starting exchange idea on this very important topics. So very quickly, so not to eat time to the session because the agenda is quite tight. Just to present the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, since 2012, it has raised actually global ambition and support to reduce the short-lived climate pollutants, addressing climate change and air pollution at the same time, with really substantial and quick impacts on the ground, with the important co-benefits on human health, food security, and economic development. So the topic is really in line with the mandate and with the mission of ENVIRONET. And so that's why we really would like to share the, to take the chance for you to share good practices and lessons learned in this environmental issue. So, and it's just a first step today for a deeper dive later on in October, when we will have the plenary meeting of the ENVIRONET network. So we will welcome another precious session during the plenary meeting in October. So very quickly through the agenda, today's seminar, we will hear about the short-lived climate pollutant reduction examples, so examples on the ground from Nigeria, Vietnam, Maldives, and as well as from Switzerland. The session will be moderated by Malik Haidara, Senior Energy and Climate Advisor of the U.S. Agency of International Development. And without wasting any more time, I would like also to introduce Martina Otto, Head of the Secretariat of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. So Mrs. Otto will provide introductory remarks before initiating properly the session. So please, again, allow me to leave you the floor, and thank you again for your work. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Fantastic, and thank you very much, for Karima, for your welcome, for your very nice introduction into this already, and particularly for the good cooperation. We're really happy to have teamed up together with the OECD ENVIRONET on this important opportunity that the short-lived climate pollutants, and particularly the methane action as well, can play towards achieving sustainable development objectives. And hand in hand with that, obviously also the need to scale up finance in this area. And I don't want to take anything away from the presentations that Malik, from a USAID perspective, so a development agency perspective, will bring, nor what our CCAC Scientific Advisory Panel Chair Drew Schendel will be outlining as part of the science. But really the amount of funding going into SLCP reductions is lagging way behind both the mitigation potential, the possibilities to build resilience, and the global and voluntary political commitments under the Global Methane Pledge, for example, now joined by 150 countries to achieve this 30% reduction by 2030 from 2020 levels. And if you allow me a very quick word on us, and you introduced us already to some degree, the CCAC, we're convened by the UN Environment Programme. We're a partnership of now 80 countries and over 80 non-state partners. And we work at that nexus of climate and clean air. We'll focus on essentially 4 pollutants that are, as you call them, double agents, the black carbon, methane, hydrofluorocarbons, and tropospheric ozone. And with regard to methane, there's a before and after the Global Methane Pledge. And before, we issued a Global Methane Assessment, making the scientific case, and Drew will speak to that as well, making the case for action, giving rise to this political commitment as well, taken with the leads of the Global Methane Pledge. And pretty much a decade of work on the issue that we had done already, that have provided a fertile ground for many joining in quickly. And after, we are a core implementer and the first port of call for countries having joined the Global Methane Pledge to support countries with policies and planning, notably the Methane Roadmap Action Program. And to date, 55 countries have actually benefited from this in support of building country roadmaps and action plans. And for some 30 countries, we've provided also a deeper dive on this roadmap development. Also work on institutional strengthening with the provision of national consultants and sector policy support, including support on inventories and so on. And there's a whole area of transformative action projects across key sectors. And there are 2 more things that are in the pipeline to help us with scale, connecting the type of work we do with finance, and particularly the roadmaps towards the finance, and that's the Technology and Economic Assessment Panel. There has been quite a bit of appetite for more guidance on technologies within a given context, looking at some of the key barriers with regard to costs, the economics around it, business models, and so on. So that's something where we're setting up a pilot for. And then a bit of a handshake process with some of the finance actors, given that, for example, the MDBs are all working on their project preparation facilities that will look into that as well, and whether that can be sort of a handover of things that we've been working on so that we're as efficient as we can collectively. And really today's discussion is a thought starter for this in-person meeting in a month's time to help us advance together. That's what we hope to get out of this. So that we have a little more traction to attract more funding to what I think is a really important nexus, given the very strong development benefits from the short-lived climate pollutant actions. And we're very curious to see what's already done with an impact on short-lived climate pollution reduction, maybe not yet labeled as such or accounted for as such, but already done, and how we can help to integrate maybe more of this content into the work that is being done on the development aid side. And with that, I stop and I thank you very much. And I hand over to our partner in crime on this, Malik.
Thank you so much, Martina. CCAC is doing an incredible job, working with our partner country to actually move the needle on reducing SLCP. Thanks so much for giving us a really quick overview of that. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Malik Haidara. I am a senior climate and energy advisor for the United States Agency for International Development. And I actually I'm very delighted to actually be the moderator of today's session. So I would like to first, thank as well OECD DAC for hosting today's event, particularly Hans and Juan, who actually did not hesitate to carve out time out of their busy schedule to help organize this event, and particularly CCAC as well. He actually was very instrumental in putting it together. So clearly, that is actually a clear indication that, for OECD DAC as well, the reduction of methane is actually urgent if we really want to actually be able to meet our climate goal. If we really want to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius maximum temperature rise within reach. So as my predecessor indicated, today's event will showcase, the development objective, the development benefit of reducing SLCP, featuring the work of CCAC partner countries. We're talking about, we're going to have Switzerland, Nigeria, Vietnam, Maldives, and Mexico to tell us a little bit about their efforts in reducing SLCP. And we also discuss how, the development community can actually best engage, right? So as far as USAID is concerned, I think really quickly, we have actually starting to seriously look into methane mitigation last year after the launch of the GMP, and how we are actually achieving that by using, if you will, existing programs in agricultural waste and energy sector. So basically, our efforts is actually in reducing methane emission is as a co-benefit of our development projects already. For example, when we have a variety of programs in the livestock sector that is actually looking into improving the productivity of livestock, and we just elevated the methane objective within that activity to start measuring, the mitigation intensity impact, from that activity. Similarly, in the waste sector as well, we have a variety of activities that are looking into improving the management of solid waste, and often we've been actually implementing those activities, but methane was never a primary objective. So now we are taking another look at those activities and further elevating the methane objective of it, and trying to measure opportunities to actually reduce methane emission. And then whenever there's an opportunity to actually even beef up particular intervention that will actually reduce the emission of methane in the waste sector, for example, talking about the installation of methane capture equipment on landfill, for example, or even when we do some landfill covering, remediation, things of that nature. They are all contributing to reducing methane. But before, we were not really measuring it. Now we're taking a deliberate effort to measure it, and then further provide additional funding to actually beef up those interventions. So in a nutshell, I'm happy to actually further discuss that with anyone on this call later on. But without further ado, I will actually pass the floor to Professor Drew Schindel. Drew is actually the chair of CCAC's Scientific Advisory Panel. He's also a professor at Duke University. He will walk us through the SLCP reduction scientific case for action. Drew, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Malik. And thanks to OECD and my CCAC colleagues for setting up this meeting. So I'm going to try to cover a lot of material and try to cover it in a relatively short time, because I really want to hear what's going on in these countries that are leaders in this space. As you heard, I work at Duke, and actually have to leave slightly early to go teach a course later, but I'll stay as long as I can. And I will now tell you a little bit about some of the science, assuming that not everybody is maybe all that familiar with the short-lived climate pollutants. So just to introduce what we're talking about, right? These are climate forcers that are many times more powerful, molecule for molecule, than CO2. And together, they're responsible for about half of the warming to date. Methane is the biggest driver of climate change amongst the short-lived climate pollutants, and methane alone is pretty close to 2/3 as much warming it's caused through the present as CO2. So it's a big player, as Martina noted. It doesn't get as 2/3 of the financing, but it's really 2/3 of the problem as far as current warming. One thing that's especially interesting, and why we have a group like CCAC, is because other than HFCs, all of these pollutants are also air pollutants. And so they're harmful to people. They're harmful to ecosystems as well. And that includes ecosystems that are food crops, but not only those. These are present in the atmosphere for a few days, up to a few years. That's what we mean by short-lived, which means if we change our emissions of these, things change quickly. Now, I think many people are well aware that, you know, air pollution is going to affect people, and climate is the other big thing. And so we've got climate and clean air. One thing I find is less familiar to many people is the idea of how important different pollutants are for agriculture. And what this is showing here is that, you know, if you compare, for example, CO2 and methane, both of those cause warming, which reduces plant growth in many cases. Both of those cause drought in some regions. But in the case of CO2, you know, plants take up CO2 to grow. And so that fertilization offsets much of the damage due to the climate change caused by CO2. When you get to methane, not only does it not have fertilization, it actually is a precursor to forming ozone, which is toxic to plants. So instead of offsetting part of the climate-induced change, you're actually augmenting it and making it much worse. And when people have tried to quantify this, like me, for example, you know, we find that if you look at future trajectories, methane can have a much larger impact than CO2 on agriculture. And in fact, even HFCs in this example, because like unlike CO2, there's no fertilization offset. And this is something we actually, you know, understand very well for many crops, is what ozone does to them. Here's an example of wheat grown in ambient air of Pakistan on the far right. And then when we filter the air to get all of the ozone pollution out, right, obviously the plant does much better. So this isn't kind of rocket scientist type stuff. This is something that we understand very well. We don't necessarily understand for every other type of plant in the world, but at least for some of the major crops, this is something we're very clear on. And this is one of the slides that the CCAC has put together to kind of highlight how we really want to bend the curve of warming over all timescales. And the short-lived climate pollutants give us by far the most leverage to bend the trajectory of warming between now and 2050. And long-lived pollutants, especially CO2, give us the most leverage in the long term. And so, you know, there are alternate trajectories, none of which are good. The only one that really works well is you mitigate both short-lived climate pollutants and CO2. If you do that, you not only avoid a lot of climate change, but as shown on the right, you get lots of health benefits, you get food security benefits, you get sustainable development benefits. And yes, there is a possibility of waiting, because the short-lived climate pollutants respond quickly, and mitigating them a little bit later. Let's say you waited till 2050 and then put your policies into place. Well, you might in the very long term come out to a similar point in climate. But here's an example from, you know, a paper from 9 years ago, which looks at the health impacts, right? And so you know, there's 40 million cumulative avoided deaths that you would be missing, right? You're missing this opportunity to provide the near-term benefits if you put off action on SLCPs. And so climate in 2100 is important, but it's not the only thing that's important. Climate is affecting people now. We've seen that all too often in the news, especially this year. But you know, this is not something that is only important in the future. And again, short-lived climate pollutants are the most leverage in the near term. One other interesting thing about short-lived climate pollutants is that often they affect climate in ways beyond just temperature, right? In the same way that they affect air pollution, they also affect rainfall patterns. And so these are some results from the new Africa assessment from UNEP CCAC and the African Union. And what they're showing here, we don't need to go into the details, but is that under a baseline scenario where you continue typical fossil fuel driven development in Africa, you induce some drought in the Sahel, in West Africa in particular, but pretty much sub-Saharan Africa from about 0 to 20 degrees north. Whereas if you follow the Agenda 2063 plan, which is discussed in the Africa assessment, you can mitigate you can essentially make that induced drought go away, right? So this is, I think, a really interesting and empowering message, because if you look at Africa, their CO2 emissions are so small, they cannot control their climate fate in terms of temperature. It's out of their hands. But they can control their climate future for things like rainfall and, of course, for air quality. That is very much up to Africa. The same is true for somewhere like Pakistan, right, which is not going to alone change the trajectory of climate change and global warming. So where do these come from and what can we do about it? Well, for many of the short-lived climate pollutants, we know pretty much exactly what to do, right? If you want to get rid of black carbon, which is a product of incomplete combustion, you want to tackle the main sources, diesel vehicles, right? We have particle filters. We can also switch to electric and modern vehicles. We replace coal and residential stoves. We replace residential wood burning. You can see somebody cooking down there in the picture at the bottom right over a traditional stone biofuel fire, and there's a program from Senegal where that's been replaced with modern cooking. And all of these things are obviously, you know, the main reason you do this is that people then don't breathe all the polluted air. They don't have to go cut down the forest to get food, to get fuel, right? There's lots of other benefits, but it also has an impact on climate. When you get to methane, and we just heard some about this from Malik, right? We know what to do there too. We need to target fossil fuel sector especially, but also the agriculture and the waste sector. And if we do all three of those together, that's really the only way we can stay on the 1.5 degree trajectory. Now, you know, methane alone is going to make a really big difference to our warming, especially over the next few decades, but it doesn't substitute for action. Methane reduction policies like the Global Methane Pledge that Martina was just mentioning, these have to be implemented alongside net zero CO2. Right? We're going for both of these at once, but we know how to do the methane part. We know how to do much of the CO2 part as well, but here, let's stick with methane. If we do the methane goals, we have this weighted towards fossil fuels because in many ways those are easiest. Agriculture and waste are important too. We put all of those together, we could avoid around 0.3 of a degree of warming. And every year, you know, we prevent hundreds of thousands of medical health impacts. We prevent billions of hours of lost work exposure, right? We can quantify all kinds of impacts of these and really show for any individual country in the world even what the impacts are likely to be from participating in an effort like the Global Methane Pledge. We have all of this online. One of the other things that's really appealing about methane is that many of the controls, in fact, the bulk of the controls are available at low cost and many at even negative cost. And I should also note, when we say low cost, this is less than about $20 a ton of CO2 equivalent. This is all neglecting the environmental benefits. This is just the cost to the operators who can often capture some gas and sell that as a source of revenue. If you were to add in the environmental damages, then virtually everything we can do would be a net savings. And people, when I talk about this kind of thing, people often say to me, well, there can't really be things at negative cost, right? Industry is not just going to walk around and see a pile of money on the ground and not pick it up, right? Well, here's an example. Here is a flaring of excess methane from oil fields in the United States. And it was a major field sold from some of the big majors to a private equity firm who has no reputation to care about. And what happened, right? Their flaring volume went up by, say, an order of magnitude. Why? Not because they don't want to pick up some cash lying on the ground, because they're going to pick up an even bigger bundle of cash, right? And they are putting all of their efforts into extracting more oil, and they could care less about how much methane they leak along the way. So these things are real, they're out there. And in many cases, the industry has the money to do this. Clearly, in some developing countries, there is some need for concessional financing. So just to close out, right, SLCPs are important for those suffering now, for biodiversity, for all of the other forests and other ecosystems affected, for providing additional time for adaptation by slowing the rate of warming in the near term, and for, of course, the associated health and agricultural benefits. And both of these things are important, right? Near-term and long-term mitigation are both key. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Malik, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Drew, for enlightening us on the many co-benefit of methane mitigation. You know, I mean, I think it's very important to actually, for the entire world to actually be aware of those co-benefit, meaning that, you know, I think the idea of reducing methane emission should not necessarily be only for reducing, you know, the global warming, but I think there is many other co-benefit that, you know, the entire world can actually benefit from it in the health, agriculture, food security sector. So now we're gonna have Janine Kuringer from the Swiss Agency Development Agency to come to the floor. Tell us a little bit more about the Swiss SLCP mitigation programs. Janine?
Thank you very much, Malik. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. So, dear development partners and dear colleagues, so I would first like to thank the ENVIRONET and CCAC for the invitation and opportunity to share with you our experiences in working on SLCPs in the framework of our development cooperation. I think, as it has been pointed out by the previous speakers, the SLCPs have a strong warming potential and contribute to climate change. Certain SLCPs, and I think it came clearly through by the presentation of Drew, are also dangerous air pollutants that have harmful effects on people, ecosystem, and agriculture productivity. And I will now focus on, in my intervention, particularly on the latter, sharing our experiences in working on air pollution. What we observe today is that there is an important discrepancy between the dimension and urgency of the air pollution problem and the small amounts of development funding that is being allocated to tackle it. Nevertheless, we all know air pollution is a major development challenge. According to the WHO, it causes approximately 7 million premature deaths per year. It also causes respiratory and cardiovascular diseases, and it has negative impacts on children's development. I think these are just some of the most important repercussions of air pollution on health. But besides that, I think there are also disastrous consequences on crop yields and ecosystem, and thus on the economic development in general. So why do we as a development agency invest in air quality? I think it has also been showed in the presentation of Drew, reducing air pollution is crucial for meeting the Sustainable Development Goal, given the multiple benefits for human health, but also for food security, protecting the ecosystem, poverty reduction and inequality, as well as contributing to climate change mitigation. Air quality is explicitly mentioned in 2 of the SDG goals and contributes to many others. As air pollution affects disproportionately people in low and middle income countries, and within these countries, the poorest communities suffer the most, supporting clean air action contributes actually to increasing the resilience of millions of people. We from Switzerland, we have been working on the topic for over 30 years. Today, we support national and local governments in Latin America, in India and China, in developing and implementing clean air regulation and action plans, as well as developing innovative technologies, as for example, tackling off-road, construction machinery, heavy vehicles and bus emissions. What are some of the impacts we have seen from air quality work? I think our experiences in our bilateral work in Latin America and Asia on reducing pollutant from the transport, bricks and foundry sector, as well as also from residential cook stove, have clearly demonstrated the multiple benefits I have mentioned before. The introduction of new technology has not only contributed to CO2 emission reductions, but has also contributed to a safer working environment and increased health of workers and people. Our work has also shown that in order to tackle air pollution, precisely understanding the sources of air pollution is important. That's why we support, in the case of India and China, also scientific collaboration in this field between Swiss and local research institutes, And we aim with this to create evidence for informing the development of policies and regulation. Besides our bilateral engagement at country and regional level, we financially support and are part of initiatives that bring the topic of reducing pollution to the global agenda, such as the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. The CCAC allows us actually to accelerate action on air pollution. Even though all countries that have air pollution problems face different contexts, there are many common challenges that need to be overcome when trying to reduce air pollution in specific sectors. We believe that the CCAC offers a platform to share experiences between the countries and actors in reducing pollution. For us, it also enables us to take actually our experiences to a larger scale and to share the solutions we have developed. We also strive at SDC to systematically integrate climate change into all our programs and projects. In order to raise the awareness of our staff on the importance of SLCPs for tackling climate change, we have organized webinars on the effect of SLPCs, in particular air pollution, and shared best practices and knowledges from our bilateral and multilateral work. Finally, I would also like to take the opportunity here and also invite you to join in advocating also in our engagement with the multilateral organization to target SLCP mitigation even more in their country programs and lending operation. I can only encourage you to integrate SLCPs and its multiple co-benefits in your portfolio as well, and to join the CCAC. So thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Malik.
Thanks so much, Jenny. And this is actually very, very helpful. And I commend SDC for the great work that you're doing in this space in Latin America, Asia, and other countries. And as well, again, the call that you just made is actually very, very important, calling everyone to actually join forces to integrate, climate change in their portfolio. That would be the only way we can actually help make progress toward dealing with the funding shortage of SLCP reduction program that we are currently facing. Thanks so much, Jenin. So next, I will call Dr. Asma'u Jibril, the CCAC focal point in Nigeria, to come and tell us a little bit about the Nigeria SLCP reduction experience. Over to you, Asma'u.
Thank you, Malik. Good afternoon from here, and thank you, CCAC, for the invitation. It is an honor to represent Nigeria at this event, which is co-organized, of course, by the CCAC, the OECD, and the USAID. I think for a stable connection, please, I would like to off my camera. I have on an unstable connection. So today I would like to highlight Nigeria's commitment to reducing short-lived climate pollutants through its national planning effort and implementation efforts with support from the CCAC across high-emitting sectors. Nigeria is a founding partner of the CCAC. Through this partnership, Nigeria has been actively contributing to global efforts to address the SLCPs. So in 2019, Nigeria developed a National Action Plan to reduce the SLCPs, which was approved by the Federal Executive Council of Nigeria. This is the National Council of Ministers chaired by the President. The plan serves as Nigeria's roadmap to advance SLCP mitigation efforts across its sectors and the country, while also implementing standards to monitor and evaluate them. In the plan, we have two priority measures, which identifies from the different sectors. This would result in an 83% reduction in black carbon emissions by 2030 and reduce methane emissions by 61%. These measures would simultaneously reduce other air pollutants, including nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and carbon dioxide, which means they could result in an overall reduction in air pollution exposure of 22% by 2030. As you may know, our NDC also is a single year NDC, which is also by all our measures are by 2030. So this aligns very well with the National Action Plan for the SLCPs. This would not only have a meaningful effect on public health, but will also save an estimated 7,000 people from premature death due to air pollution by 2030. To increase the implementation of actions outlined in the National Action Plan, Nigeria has also made efforts to integrate SLCPs into its climate change monitoring, reporting, and verification. That is the MRV. Specifically, the Nigeria Climate Registry. This comprehensive effort includes a detailed assessment and implementation plan for the household energy sector, complete with state-level mitigation pathways and health impact assessments. So some of the CCAC-supported projects in Nigeria are that are supported by the CCAC. Under the agri sector, we have funding from the CCAC to develop a tier 2 emission inventory and mitigation assessment for the agriculture sector through an improved national greenhouse gas inventory and robust measurement, reporting, and verification, the MRV systems, for mitigation actions in agriculture. This exercise will also strengthen the government's ability to compile GHG inventories and incorporate mitigation options assessment into its NDC implementation plan. In addition, also, Nigeria is actively addressing open field burning to promote the efficient management and alternative utilization of farm waste to mitigate the burning of residues in open fields. We also have developed a guideline to reduce methane emissions, and we're in the implementation stage right now. And you also may recall that Nigeria proudly stands as one of the global methane pledge champions, actively contributing to the global effort to combat methane emissions. In this role, Nigeria plays a pivotal role in advocating for methane action on both global and regional platforms, emphasizing the importance of addressing this potent greenhouse gas. Also, the SLCP Coordination Office, which is the National Council on Climate Change, is working with the Ministry of Finance, Budgets, and National Planning, working to increase inclusion of SLCP projects in the national budgetary appropriations across the different ministries, departments, and agencies. So Nigeria is working on the reduction of methane emissions. As you may know, we have also included it in our revised NDC to reduce 61% of this methane emissions, fugitive methane emissions, by the year 2031. Thank you. Thank you, Malik. Back to you.
Yes, thanks so much, Dr. Jibril. This is actually a very, very good to hear. I mean, Nigeria is clearly a key pioneer in Africa in all, SLCP reduction, from a variety of policy document that you develop, and the government is really committed to it. And I really commend the government of Nigeria for all of the work that he has put in place to actually reduce emission of SLCP in the country. So I think clearly that can be definitely used as an example for many, many, many other countries. So next one here, we'll give the floor now to Tran Dai Ngia from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in Vietnam. I hope I did not butcher your name. If I did, please accept my apologies for that. So you have the floor now to tell us a little bit about your Vietnam experience. Over.
Thank you, Malik, and also thank you, CCAC and Junior, for inviting me, and also thank you, CCAC, for go along with us in the fight to the climate change, also SLCP so far. And since in Vietnam, most of the SLCP in agriculture sector or food sector are the kinds of the greenhouse gas emission. Most of the greenhouse gas emission from the affluent sector are related to the SLCP. This is why we don't have the separate action plan for SLCP, but the other is included in our action plans to implementing mitigation of the emission. So I can show from, you can see from my presentation, you can Vietnam also is one of the developing country had a very strong commitment in reducing SLCP, also the greenhouse gas emission. In general, we also joining the GMP pledge, and a lot of very strong commitment in bring to the net zero in 2050. And from the COP26, you can see that we are institutionalized by the government policy to cut the 50% of the methane. Most of the methane, I think the agriculture account for about 62% of the total methane emission from the country. And you can see from my presentation in the two NDC in 2020 and in 2022, we increased the commitment from the 9% to the 15.8% of the total cuts as compared to business as usual from the unconditional condition, and increasing from 27% to the 43.5% in the new NDC in 2020. So we find out a different mitigation pathway. So we can see from, we have the three subsectors, land use and forest and land use, and crop production and livestock, and most of the activity from the crop production is reducing the methane from rice cultivation. We are applying different water management techniques, and from the others coming from the treatment of residuals like a stop savanna burning, or applying the circular economy. For livestock sector, we try to reducing both from the enteric fermentation from the ruminants like a cow, cattle, or the other ruminants, and better waste management by using the applied biogas. And you can see we're working on the very details of the different measures, unconditional methods and the conditional method. And we're also calculating the costs with the unconditional method. The country sector alone, affluent sector can have to invest more than $3 billion in order to bring to the reducing to get the target, especially the methane cut of 30%. And for the with additional support, we can bring the down, as I mentioned, about 32%. For this, with the different sectors like livestock, crop production, and even the forest, focusing on the keeping the forest cover, because the forest is the sectors that we're providing offset for the carbon emission from either sectors, so that we can be able to bring to the net zero. But we also face a lot of challenge. The first is about the tool and capacity and economic feasibility. And the same with our college is about the MRV, the cost-effective investment plan to upscale decarbonization in agriculture, value chain-based development, and development of digitalized transformation of agriculture, like e-carbon footprints, e-traceability, and also the logistic connection, the technical cost, information, funding, access to the market information for the low carbon, climate responsible value chain, to promoting the demand side of the low carbon, climate responsible agriculture products domestically and internationally, and also either related to risk bearing and sharing among different stakeholders along the value chain actors to promote the new technology and sustainable low carbon measures. And also related to policy mechanism to mobilize, incentivize private sector to invest in up and cascaded out practices that achieve the co-benefit like mitigation, environmental, economic, and also applying low carbon and zero emission practices to promote the circular economy, especially managing the wastes and the food also. So that is in the short, and I hope that you can see from my presentation. Back to you, Manik. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Trung, for this brief overview of what the government of Vietnam is doing in the agricultural sector. And I also commend the government for increasing the SLCP reduction targets from 9% to nearly 16%. And I really hope that we will be able to actually make great progress toward achieving that target. Particularly with partnership of other countries as well. So with that, we will now give the floor to Alimat Shazlin from the Environment Analysis, Waste Management and Pollution Control Department in the Maldives to tell us a little bit about the SLCP reduction experience in the waste sector. The floor is yours, Alimat.
Thank you, Malik. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shazlin, and I'm from Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, and Technology. I'm an environment analyst. So thank you for giving this opportunity to me. I would like to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll be highlighting about the solid waste management in Maldives. So first, sorry about that. First, I will be talking about the country profile because we do have 5 lakh people living in the country, and from that, 41% of population is currently living in Malé city, that is the capital. Other 46% is in island, then 10% lives in the resort. Looking at the geographically, we are geographically very dispersed, which is a kind of challenge that we are facing while we are managing the West. So we have about 1,190 coral islands grouped in a double chain, 27 atolls. And total covers approximately 90,000 square kilometer, and from there 298 are only the dry land. We have no hills or rivers, it's a flat land. So by looking into waste management, as we are very much geographically dispersed and a unique feature, the Maldives government has come up with a plan to divide the country into zones in order to manage the waste. So in the left, you can see the diagram where we have built 7 zones that is divided into 3 main regional waste management facility, one at the north, one at the middle, and one at the south. So the plan is to carry the waste near to the waste transfer station to the regional waste management facility, where there will be an incinerator, and waste to energy will be built in the regional waste management center. We are currently at the stage of We are at the stage of building and planning, and there are ongoing 3 projects, which is doing the waste to energy and the incinerator in 3 parts of the Maldives. So in Maldives, Waste Management Corporation, WEMCO, is the main service provider that works towards the disposal of waste in Greater Mala area and few other selected islands. Currently, they are provided in few islands. The islands which WEMCO is not providing the service, the island council are responsible for to do the service. Also, they are responsible of drafting waste management plan, which will be approved by the Environmental Protection Agency. So here are some categories that in Maldives we are planning to segregate. So there will be 5 categories: organic, inorganic, infectious, hazardous, and bulky waste, which will be segregated and transfers to the regional waste management facilities. This is a snapshot from the National Emission Inventory, which this was done in 2019. And as you can see, there have been a high emission of waste from 2010 to 2018, and these are the estimated values. But now I believe that when the study was done, we have been openly burning in the islands, and now that we have stopped it, the main regional facility, that is Tilafushi, so I believe this amount will be very low from now. But this is the latest emission study that have done in Maldives. So this, as I have said, open burning in Tilafushi has stopped from 2021, which is a very which has given us which Oh, okay, I'm sorry. The Tilafushi we have stopped from 2021, and this gave a big opportunity to start over and prohibit the open burning in Maldives. And in the 3 regional waste management facility, the incinerator and waste energy facility, currently we are in formulating a guideline that will be followed in these 3 regional waste management facility, the air emission, but currently it is in a drafting stage, which will be published very soon. So at the moment we are following the EU standard, and we have not been burning from till, but I believe some islands still burn, but it's very low. We do have policies and regulation towards this, and recently we have Waste Management Act, which was ratified in 2020, and we are currently in the stage of making regulations, and we do have a strategic action plan. Also, we do have a single-use plastic phase-out plan, which has already have been implementing and already banned 12 single-use plastic products. And we do also have waste management regulation. Also, we do have a Maldives Marine Litter Action Plan, which was published in 2018. The challenges we are facing in West is a lack of resources, lack of fully implemented regulation, also the limitation due to geographical distribution. But now we are trying to build a waste tracking system which from how much from both, and how much the waste is when the waste is transferred to the station, how much there is the difference. So there will be we are trying to build a waste trafficking system. Also, we have limitation for monitoring the policies, plans, also a limited land space to manage the waste. Thank you. If you have any question, you can ask.
Thanks so much, Alima, for this this overview. I commend as well the Maldives for actually stopping all open burning. That is actually would be a really good contribution to reducing and to improving air quality in the country. Wonderful. Thanks for doing that, and we're looking forward to seeing the waste management guideline that you mentioned. So with that actually put an end to a series of presentation for today, but we're gonna actually jump into the next session of today event, which is also very exciting. That's gonna be the discussion session where we are inviting all participants to actually ask any questions they may have to the speakers, and that would be an opportunity for the speakers as well to elaborate further on some of the points that they have actually talked about earlier. So please, if you have any question, do raise your hands, and we'll actually call you to ask your question. And do not hesitate as well if you prefer to put your question in the chat box. I'll be happy to read that out loud as well for the speakers to respond. But I'm happy to actually start, with a few questions here to the speakers, right? So let me see here. So basically, this one here, Dr. Asmau Jibril, for you here. So as you indicated during your presentation, I think Nigeria is one of the pioneers in Africa in developing regulation policies that clearly outline the country's commitment to reduce SLCP. And I also commend Nigeria for even setting up, the Nigeria Climate Change Council as well. That will be a really good oversight body as well to make progress towards your NDC goal. So to date, has Nigeria been able to leverage any bilateral aid arrangement to scale climate and clean air solutions? Do you have any, can you share anything on that for us, please?
Thank you, Malik, for that question. Yes, Nigeria, like I said, has been a pioneer member of the CCAC. And of course, we've developed the methane guidelines. So we've been working with the CCAC and the CATF and the regulatory body of the oil and gas sector, which is the defunct Department of Petroleum Resources, now called the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. So we've been working together with these different partners to reduce methane, especially because I'm talking of, Nigeria really, most of its work on methane is on the oil and gas sector, but we're looking into the agric and emissions from agric and waste. That is on methane, of course, not the other SLCPs. So having support, most of the support we have is from the CCAC. And we always look forward to getting more support from the CCAC. Apart from that, I can't recall having any other bilateral partnerships or agreements with other partners on air quality any air quality work or anything, but the CCAC, and of course the CATF, which is also through the CCAC. So that is where we are now. But of course, we're open to any support from anywhere to improve our the air quality in the country, and of course that results in air quality globally. So thank you for that.
That is absolutely true. Thanks so much, Dr. Jibril. I think you know, definitely there is a lot of opportunities in Nigeria to work in this space, and I hope you'll be able to actually identify some partnership, you know, very soon to help you make progress toward your SLCP reduction targets. Thanks so much. I see that Abraham is actually among us today, but we haven't heard from Mexico, which is another country that has demonstrated serious commitment to SLCP reduction through a number of policies, some of which supported by CCAC. I recall that, for example, in 2020, Mexico launched its national strategy to reduce SLCP for climate change, air quality, and human health as well. So Abraham, can you please tell us a little bit more about Mexico SLCP reduction strategy, and whether your country has been able to leverage any bilateral aid arrangement to scale climate and clean air solutions? Over.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Hello, hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Abraham. We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to the CCAC. It's a pleasure for us to share the advances in terms of the LCP in Mexico. Yeah, well, in the case of Mexico, as you mentioned, we launched our first strategy to reduce the short-lived climate pollutants in Mexico, developed by the support by the CCAC. And as you know, currently, we are working with that efforts. Specifically, we started with the reduction of black carbon, one of the main goals. There what the initiation was talking about these actions in terms of the benefits of the health. One of them, and the main reasons that Mexico put in the NDC the black carbon, is because it's one of short climate pollutants, but as well is one of the main pollutants that are related to the health impacts. So in that sense, Mexico is working currently with the NDC, the commitment of 51% of the reduction, specifically for the household energy, to reduce the emissions of black carbon. Other point that we want to share with all of you is the efforts to combine at the first stage the relationship between, I listened at the beginning as well, the relation in between climate change and air quality. We have been working at the initiation of the CCAC in terms of tackling to these efforts directly to the benefits of mitigate the air quality emissions and the benefits of the climate change. We are currently working in Mexico in the national point of view. It's launching of a lot of programs, and one of the programs is the air quality program that is developed by the support of the national government, but is applied from the subnational governments in Mexico. And the main highlight of this one is that is the first time that these programs are combined completely with climate change emissions reductions, are specifically related with the policy. Drew mentioned at the beginning the transport sector. In terms of probably we can reduce the particle matter coming from the transport sector with filters. But we're talking about in these programs that what is the best in terms of the commitments of Mexico climate change and in terms of the improve the air quality. Well, this is the way that we can do it, not duplicate the efforts in terms of one program of air quality to reduce black carbon for the transport sector coming from filters and the climate change coming for electromobility. Now are completely combined. Sorry?
No, go ahead.
Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I will finish. So in that sense, we are now in that direction. And as well with the NDC commitments, we are working with the CCAC, supported by the CCAC in the national planning. We are working with the LEAP model. Everybody probably knows about that. And we are integrate all the co-benefits or multiple benefits in terms of the policies, the national policies of climate change, how it looks in terms of benefits of air quality, but as well, other regulations or policy on air quality, how is the benefit on climate change? So for this point of view, it's important that the decision makers can understand how look and a modeling exercise and the benefit can have if you do some analysis in terms of air quality, how it looks for the benefit of climate change in LEAP, and as well, climate change, NDC, how look in the benefits of air quality. So in general, this is the advances we have currently, and we are working with the CCAC colleagues in these new stages and these new efforts to mitigate. And just for finish, in methane as well, we are doing the same. Sorry, I will not finish with that one. With methane as well, we are doing the same. But now we are working with the main sectors of we detected in the strategy, and we are doing now the modelings for the same exercise I mentioned. So that's my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Abraham. This is actually very, very helpful as well. Mexico is also another hotspot for SLCP emission. I think there's a lot of opportunities to partner with Mexico to make some progress on the reduction of SLCP there as well. Are there any questions from the audience? Anyone? No. So I can go on again. So I think I want to actually bring in Professor Schindel here. I think you did an amazing, that is an amazing analysis, you know, to sort of like put some numbers to the co-benefit of reducing SLCP. I mean, some of these numbers are really impressive. When you say, for example, that we can prevent 45 million deaths by 2040 by reducing the emission of SLCP, that is actually impressive. And even when you look at the numbers around yield increase in the agricultural sector as well as a result of the reduction of methane and other SLCP, I think that is something that countries in general really need to actually hear more about, because I think we haven't. I think Janine mentioned here that there is a discrepancy between the funding available to reducing SLCP and the true impact, climate impact of SLCP emissions. So I think some of the numbers that you actually presented today are very important to actually spread much broader, so everyone, both the public and the private sector, can really understand not only the urgency of working toward reducing SLCPs, but also to understand the co-benefit of that. So the question that I have for you here, the data, do we have the data available per country, or is just something global that we have? Because I think if the data can be made available per country in terms of death, that could be prevented as a result of the reduction of SLCP, it might be appealing for some government to actually be more interested in actually working toward reduction of SLCP. Over to you, Drew.
I think Drew had to leave. He did announce it at the beginning, and he was on up to pretty much when you asked your question, I think. And he's not running away. What we have done, maybe a quick response. we have done a breakdown of potentials for reductions of, for example, methane by country. So that's something we have. That doesn't go all the way to, we haven't extracted the co-benefits by the country yet, but we also are working now on a cost-benefit analysis, which will come forward. So that may actually give another impetus to all of this. And I think it's a good suggestion to be able to really break it down as well to the country level.
I think that would be if that can be made available, that would be very impactful in my view, right? Okay, now here I'd like to ask Tran, I think you did mention a few challenges already during your presentation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what gaps exist in terms of technical and financial supports to achieve the targets of reducing methane in the agricultural sector in Vietnam? And the other question that I have for you, how receptive, because I mean, rice is actually a major crop, in Vietnam, and the government of Vietnam is also committed to reduce methane emission from the rice sector. So how interested do you hear me?
Thanks. We have the deep couple of things, as I mentioned about the challenge. The challenge is I also intended to ask our colleagues from the other countries the experience to incentivize the private sector to invest in the low carbon methods, because as the report from UNEP in the mitigation gap, you can see that there's the needs for the mitigation. The cost is the investment. I think about we only now satisfy about the 1/10 or 1/30th for the needs for implementing different mitigation methods. So having the sustainable financier to investing to the low carbon method, especially the reduction of the emission, especially SLCP like methane, it's require a lot of investment. So this is why we have the conditional and unconditional. With the unconditional, I will conditional very ambitious. And in Vietnam, we are now looking at different channels. For instance, we are now trying to approaching the carbon markets. So this is why we also, when we getting the carbon market, then a different schemes requiring different methodology and different MRV system, and sometimes one is very different from each other. And we have now, you know, that the government is now, I think they already approved. We will have the proposal for the 1 million hectares of rice, low quality, high quality and low carbon rice. Under the support from, I think, USAID also involved in discussion with World Bank, and under the TCAP scheme and scale scheme. But then we're still also discussing, because the ambition for different deciding the baseline, the MRV system, and that's the methodology of crediting or the certification process is required differently, especially if we now the Vera and others is they are updating their methodology and things like that. So that is one of the problem, I think, is that. But we're looking at the more sustainable financial sources for implementing it, especially the involvement of the private sector. Without the private sector list, I think we will have the big problem. The public sector cannot invest enough in this action. We need to involvement and led by the private sector. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks so much, Tran. Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you mentioned, I think USAID is actually engaging with the Vietnam government to support efforts to reduce methane emission in the rice sector. As a matter of fact, you know, a new project just got awarded just last week. to start that work. So I hope that will actually lead us to great result fairly soon. Now, Halima, actually, you did actually a wonderful presentation on the waste management program in the Maldives. And the one question that I have for you, you mentioned something about incineration for power, waste to power generation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is the incinerator already operational, or it is something that the government is thinking about developing?
Hi. Actually, it is not an operational, but one of the incineration facility is almost in operation, and I believe that was once it was started, but there are some issues that need to be fixed, and it will be operational soon. And the other two, in South, we have already waste to energy facility that has been handed over very recently to the WEMCO. That is the WEMCO will be handling the facility. But incinerator, there also it is ongoing project. In middle in Malé also incinerator is an ongoing project. It's ongoing.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, thanks so much. Look forward to actually hearing more about the launching of that incinerator. Any other question from the audience?
Hi, Abraham.
Go ahead.
Yes, it's more than a question, it's just a comment. It's regarding what I listened before, that many of the probably countries would not develop a proper strategy in terms of short-lived climate pollutants. One of the recommendations, if they are not or are currently develop one, in terms of the strategies or even related to air quality programs, if they are currently have the NDC's commitment, if they are currently doing some efforts, one of the things the CCAC can support to them is how is make the connections and benefits in air quality. If they have some sectorial analysis that they want to launching. So it's one just a recommendation in terms of the things that Mexico has been happened during this exercise to integrate NDC with air quality. It's just a comment.
Thanks, Abraham. Martina, do you have anything to add to that comment?
I think it's absolutely critical to look at the different national priorities. Clearly, air pollution is pretty much everywhere a national priority, and combining as much as we can the climate and the clean air action gives us the double dividends with the very noticeable local, immediate local benefits as well as the climate benefits. So I think that's really interesting. Did you want me only to come back on this particular point, or are we already getting to the little bit of the wrap up?
No, actually, I think that should be good enough. I think I do want to bring in Janine before we wrap up. Though, Janine, I think thanks again for your review for the SDC program. We've learned a lot about. I mean, we heard a lot about the Article 6, work that the Swiss is actually doing in a variety of countries, particularly in Ghana. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, if you are familiar with the key objective of that program?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we as Switzerland, we have already become quite active under Article 6. We have signed agreements with different countries. Ghana was the first one, and it has also been the first one where a project has been launched. Actually, it's a project about supporting rice farmers to release less methane by introducing an alternative wetting and drying technology for rice cultivation. And the way the system works is that we support through Article 6 financing the introduction of the technologies, the capacity building of the farmers, and through the emission reduction that are being achieved by this intervention, they will be they will be accounted for Switzerland's emission reductions obligation. Sorry for that. So I think it's kind of another way beyond, I would say, ODA financing, because it's not at all linked to our ODA activities of Switzerland. Another way of mobilizing, in particular, funding of the private sector, because this money that we use actually for investing in this project in Ghana, but also in the other compensation projects we are looking into, is coming from the private sector. So I think we talk a lot about the necessity to mobilize additional funding, in particular from the private sector. I think Article 6.2 gives us an opportunity to do so. But it's clear it's not. This will not be the solution to all of it. I think we still need to strengthen our efforts, be it by the cooperation, bilateral, multilateral, but also by involving even more, I think, and crowding in even more the private sector, also in their core businesses, because I think we have seen now the sectors that are at in center here are from oil and gas. There's a lot of money in the sector. Then there is also agriculture, which is concerned. So I think there are opportunities to bring in more private finance in the future.
I couldn't agree more with you, Janine, on that. I think we are all eager. Particularly USAID is very much eager to actually learn more about your experience in the implementation of Article 6, and let's definitely stay in touch on this. With that, if there's no further questions from the audience, I think we may proceed to the conclusion and the closing remarks for this session. So with that, I will actually give the floor to Martina for her conclusion remark.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Malik. And I think that was a very interesting first step into maybe what is a new world collectively for all of us, learning from each other and sharing to take things a bit further together. And I think for me, one thing that I would like to hold is there is a real case for inclusion into the work of the development community, because in the end, the SLCP reduction is really a matter of sustainable development. And here, maybe we need to look at OECD and making it a part of their climate action commitments, and looking at the need to keep 1.5 alive. And here, the methane action is critical alongside decarbonization, given the global warming potential and the shorter lifetime in the atmosphere, and really looking at the reduction of the near-term warming, which can help reduce vulnerability as climate is impacting now, and not only, well, in an abstract way, but very much directly linked as well to health, all the way to the rainfall patterns and so on. We heard about these very, very strong co-benefits, and I think they're really a compelling story here, and probably we need to bring them out much more to the different audiences, given the connection between climate and clean air, so the air pollution aspects with the direct impact on people and ecosystems. And here again, I mean, coming back, so it's directly health impacts, but it's also indirectly through the impacts on crop productivity and with that food security. And on that first bit, I want to hold as well that the solutions for many of these issues are known, they're proven, and they're low cost. Often measures go along with, for example, productivity gains, so it makes sense from that sense to go forward. Now, the second point that I want to hold is that methane work is already done. And that goes just as much for the countries as well as the support provided by the development agencies. But we did hear that this could be a bit more deliberate, or we could be more deliberate about it, more often it happens not as a primary objective, but it so happens that. So if we go about it more specifically and help measure the impact, we can tell that story and actually bring this out much more. We've seen a few trailblazers on the Sustainable Development Agency side, and obviously with USAID having done an overview of the portfolio, for example, is such a great first step into this. There's work on livestock, again, with the productivity gains, there's work on waste, with the improvement to solid waste management, and so on, and this real idea of how to elevate methane reduction and measuring the benefits that we see. Very compelling story as well from SDC, from Janine, with actions really across all the continents, the different portfolios, and really joining forces to the call to join forces to integrate climate change, including the SLCPs, into the portfolios. This last bit on the carbon markets, I think, well, we're really looking at new territory here as well, and the work on Article 6.2 is very interesting. And as we heard from the countries, then the baseline work and the MRV system will be really critical as we look as well at the certification and so on. We heard that there's real country readiness across all regions. Obviously, we had only a few samples here, but it goes from commitment, the inclusion of specific targets into the NDCs, short-lived climate pollutant planning, setting up oversight bodies, working on inventories, and all the way to sector measures with very clear things like the ban on open burning or Nigeria's policies linked to oil and gas. And so there's real readiness for scale up. There's some money that has come, that has been attracted to work on the range of sectors, but clearly that's only a drop in the ocean in a sense. And we need to go beyond, because there are a number of challenges, including the implementation of regulation, the MRV, but also very much the incentivization of the private sector. How do we pull them in? And we just ended on that, so I don't have to say much more about it. And that will help us to not only help with the conditional, but also the unconditional, but also with the conditional commitments by countries. So the message here is they're open for business. And I hope with that, it has given us a bit of a flavor of a sense of direction that we can build on when we will meet in Paris. I think this was exciting. I would love to be able to dig deeper on the opportunities and what it takes to include the SLCP action more clearly into the climate finance decisions. What do you need from us? How can we help? What do you have already in terms of systems in place? So with that, maybe as well, please don't hesitate to get back to us, be it on a list of countries that have gone through planning or have worked with us on the roadmaps. So who is open for business? Yeah, let's see together how we can take this forward. I want to really thank Malik for a fantastic moderation. So thank you. And obviously all the joint planning that went into the session, and for Karima for teaming up with us and hosting us. And I guess with that, I hand back to Karima. Thank you.
Indeed, Martina, thank you. Thank you very much for your wrapping up, which actually, gave it the flavor of the whole 1 hour and a half that we had together. Very interesting indeed, very practical, very, solutions oriented. And really thank you to everyone for, participating and contributing to that discussion. My takeaway as, climate finance negotiator as well, with another hat on. So not really an implementing person in a way, but really like very practical, very meaningful, and a lot of lessons to be learned also from the development cooperation side, and also to be applicable to other streams, especially, and one among others, the engagement of the private sector for climate action and climate related development finance. So really thank you very much. I think we can close here, not without further ado, and looking forward to the ENVIRONET plenary on the 4th of October. And it's been really a pleasure to host this webinar, and again looking forward to continue the discussion really and continue learning from each other. Thank you for your moderation, Malik, and thank you to all the presenters really.
Thank you,
And have a
everyone.
nice evening and the continuation of the day.
Thank you.
Goodbye.